The plan is very simple. So they want your government to make a pressure on us to agree on what Russians want. That's simple. But now the world see everything. Everyone understand that it is Russians who are shooting on these stations, on this station. Everyone understand that it is blackmail. There's brutal blackmail, and all responsibilities is laid on Russia.
President Zelensky has warned against potential escalation of Russian attacks to coincide with Ukraine's Independence Day tomorrow, which also marks 6 months since the Russian invasion of the country. In a briefing based on declassified intelligence, the US State Department has warned about increased threats to civilians and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. We can talk now to a Ukrainian MP, Andrii Osadchuk. Good evening to you, Andrei.
Good evening, Carol. Thank you for having me here.
Well, really good to speak to you. Just tell us a bit about what the mood is like in Ukraine tonight. We've had an awful lot of warnings that this anniversary tomorrow could be an occasion for Russia to launch yet more attacks, perhaps on civilian targets.
Look, from one side, we very much adapted to this awful reality. Luckily, humans are very adaptive to everything around. So even I can sleep sometimes and didn't wake up during air raid sirens, which is happening, in fact, daily. From another hand, we understand that for today, it's a big crisis in Kremlin because they are not able to reach any targets, which they changed, I think, 5 or 6 times for the last 6 months in Ukraine. The front line is frozen, so they can do nothing with the Ukrainian army and with Ukrainian people with its conventional weapons. For 6 months, they launched probably 3,500 missiles on Ukrainian cities and villages. Yes, we confirmed yesterday that we lost about 9,000 servicemen and unfortunately unknown number of civilians, but including Mariupol, it's more than 25,000 people has been killed till today. So that's why it's difficult to surprise us with something. But we know that these guys in Kremlin, they very much paranoid due to different symbols and things like that. So that's why, yes, the risk is very high that this night and next night may be very hot, as in Kiev, as in any other cities. Right now, I'm speaking to you from the very center of the Kiev. At the moment, it looks quite calm, but any moment it may change.
So can I just ask you, I know that a lot of people have chosen to leave some of the big cities. I mean, what sort of advice are civilians being given in the light of this possible threat?
So from one side, for the last couple of months, many people returned to Kiev in particular. So for today, I think it's almost 3 million people probably inside of Kiev. But yes, 2 days ago, there were a lot of instructions from officials and from our allies to be extremely careful. American embassy advised its citizens to leave Kiev and leave Ukraine, in fact, but it was not the first time when they did that. And honestly speaking, just at the evening, I was walking around my house and it was the last people on the street and it was the last cars on the street as usual, meaning that people took this warning seriously. And it looks like many people was trying to leave the city for these couple of days.
And of course, we know that there are no large public celebrations of Independence Day because of the risks, because of the threat. But how would you say morale is in Kyiv? We've had 6 months of this war. As you say, it's quiet there at the moment. But of course, we've seen that strikes can happen with no notice and inflict damage, destruction, and of course, deaths and injuries.
Look, one of the miracles of this war, and it was a big surprise for everyone from both sides of confrontation. It was a surprise for Russians. It was a surprise for our Western allies, but we didn't run away. Everyone supposed that we will collapse in 3 days, but for the 6 months we are fighting. As I said again, people adapted to that. And about celebrations, were very creative. And for the last 3 days already, on Krishchatyk, is the central street in Kiev, we created the so-called parade, Russian parade. It's a kind of installation our military brought to Krishchatyk, I think 30 or 40 burned Russian tanks and different armored vehicles. So they was planning to be in Krishchatyk. Now they are on Krishchatyk. And there were a crowd of people yesterday. Everyone was making pictures around. It was a kind of celebration. So Russians, they're in the center of the Kiev, but in the format of burned tanks and burned armored vehicles.
And let me ask you, there have been strikes on Russian military installations in Crimea, in territory that's been occupied by the Russians since 2014. Should we see that as the start of an attempt to actually regain territory, or is this just about making life difficult for the occupying forces?
Look, we all grown up on the stories of the big wars, and when we say about turnaround in the war, everyone is waiting for some kind of Stalingrad battle or I don't know, Waterloo. But I don't think that something like that will happen in this war. From another hand, for the last month, we see this turnaround is happening. Because as I said, the front line is frozen, despite huge efforts from Russia's side. From another side, we start actively using modern Western, especially American equipment. And yes, we're attacking different targets, mostly army depots and military bases in Crimea and in other parts of occupied Ukraine. And all that is create huge problems for Russian, and that's one of the arguments why they cannot move further. So that's why my assumption that the turnaround in this war is already happening. Definitely we need more resources, because for today we are very successful in resistance, but we need to kick them out of Ukraine as soon as possible.
And can I just ask you what information you have about what's happening at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant? There has been a huge amount of concern about what is going on there. We had learned that Russia had apparently said that it would allow UN inspectors onto the site. I mean, has that happened? Is there still uncertainty about the situation at this huge nuclear plant?
Look, for us, it's a quite expected way of Russian behavior. Their strategy is always to threaten outside world, especially to threaten our allies, to force them to make a pressure on Ukrainian leadership to reach any valuable for Russia ceasefire or surrender or things like that. If you remember, in May, April, they were threatening openly the West with nuclear weapons. I think after dialogues with Comrade Xi Jinping and maybe Americans, they closed their mouth, but they continue this nuclear blackmail now with the nuclear station in Zaporizhzhia. The plan is very simple. So they want your government to make a pressure on us to agree on what Russians want. That's simple. But now the world see everything. Everyone understand that it is Russians who are shooting on these stations, on this station. Everyone understand that it is blackmail. There's brutal blackmail, and all responsibilities is laid on Russia. I don't think that
Okay.
the risk is huge because they understand the consequences. But knowing Russian brutality, everything may happen, and the risk is still high.
Ukrainian MP Andrii Osadchuk, thank you so much for joining us tonight from Kiev.